Carlee Russell, the Alabama nursing student who went missing for 2 days after telling 911 she found a stranded toddler last week, has been charged with 2 misdemeanors in connection with the hoax. That's according to the police. Russell's being charged with falsely reporting to law enforcement officers and falsely reporting an incident. Well, earlier today, I spoke with the Hoover, Alabama police chief. His name, Chief Derzis. He answered a lot of my questions about where the investigation goes from here, what Carlee Russell has said in the interim since being charged, whether or not more charges are coming, and what he thought of the overall case, whether or not it took away resources from his department to seek out suspects in other crimes, including missing persons cases as well. Here's our conversation. You've been in law enforcement for a really long time. Have you seen a case where someone fakes their own disappearance that has gotten so much national attention in your long career?
I have not. Not only, obviously this thing started locally, and then it went nationally, and then it went internationally, and I'm not really sure why it garnered so much captivity, and possibly because of maybe the baby on the interstate. I really haven't been able to figure it out, to be honest.
You know, I just wanted to ask as well if you're any closer, your team of investigators in figuring out the why in all of this. Are you any closer in figuring out, the motivations behind why Russell, might have led everyone on this story?
We've got, so many investigators that have been working, but we really, until we know factually the actual reason, and there's a couple of things that we'd love to know. Factually, we don't know where she was for the 49 hours of disappearance. And I don't know the end game, don't know exactly what was the end game. And to me, the issue for her, when we talk about the end game, what happens if the police are close and actually get to her before she's able to make that second call and leave the interstate before we arrive? If we arrive prior to that, what happens then? Where's the baby? So there's just so many questions that I'd love to get answered by her. And if she doesn't answer them, I can assure you that our investigators are still trying to figure it out. Hopefully we can figure it out ourselves.
So still at this point, we don't know where Carlee Russell was for that 49 hours. You don't have any indications of that?
No, again, it would be all speculation, and we just want to deal in facts.
Okay. I wanted to ask as well, in your gut, what were the kind of first indications where this was a missing persons investigation that then transitioned into an investigation into someone who made, false reports to law enforcement? What was that hinge moment in the investigation for you and your investigators?
No, for me, I've been here a long time, doing police work for a long time, and the initial phone call that I got at the house to tell me exactly what happened that particular night on July the 13th, I was a little surprised, and they talked about that, there had been a baby on the interstate. She was talking to 911, then she disconnected with 911 and called a relative that was talking, and then all of a sudden they hear kind of a scream. Police get up there, and she's no longer there. My first question, of course, was how many other calls that we have that saw the baby, and they said none. So that kind of raised a little hair on the back of my neck for a few seconds there. But I've learned after many years in law enforcement that until you have the facts, we can have thoughts that maybe this isn't, but until you know factually that it's not, you work like it is, and of course we did. And of course we had the Secret Service was able to extract some of the data from her telephone. That certainly helped us. And then I think also the video on the interstate that following day, where we were able to determine that the time that she was talking to 911, that toddler would have had to walk 600 yards. And being a football fan, we compared that to 6 football fields. And to think that a toddler could walk 6 football fields without stopping, without getting in the roadway. I've had kids, many people have had, and they find that pretty much, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it seems like the reports of the sighting of this toddler on the interstate, a very busy interstate at night, it seems to me, and you're alluding to the fact that that was really the first red flag in all of this, and then that kind of precipitate, looking into her search history on the internet once it did turn into a potential hoax investigation?
Yes, sir. And again, even though we had seen, I had that question about the baby, and of course, some of our investigators did, but, when that story became not only national, international story, as you can well imagine, there were hundreds and hundreds of tips coming in. And, under the circumstances that we don't know factually that this didn't happen, we're running down hundreds and hundreds of tips. We're making phone calls all over the country, talking to people. And you have to, obviously, because you just never know that one tip, that one thing that may sound crazy to you, get on the telephone, and it could be that little lead that we were looking for. So until we really saw, the interstate video, and then, of course, some of the Google searches that she had made from her place of business, and then from her telephone, that pretty much sealed the deal that, the possibilities of this being a real are probably slim.
Yeah, your, force expended so many resources in, looking for Carlee Russell at the time over the course of that 49 hours. Did that take away from current outstanding missing persons reports there in your jurisdiction or your district that you couldn't focus on because you had to focus on finding Carlee Russell?
We were very fortunate that during those 49 hours, that there really wasn't any significant case that we had to, abort at that time. So again, we had some cases that we certainly could have been working on, and we didn't, but there wasn't anything that was so significant, anything like this.
I just wanted to get your thoughts as well. Once Carlee did return home to her parents there, we don't really know a lot of the information about what transpired or what was said. It's kind of all secondhand from her parents, and they didn't really want to go into it. They've been interviewed countless times. When your officers responded, though, once they got word she was safe, can you offer or divulge any information that was said, the questions they might have asked Carlee Russell, right at the get-go in that first interview? Because we have very little daylight into that kind of reunion.
Right. Well, the investigators were able to go to the hospital and meet with her for a very short period of time to talk to her. And she did divulge at that time that she had been kidnapped from the interstate, that a gentleman had taken her and taken over a fence, put her in a car, ended up taking her, put her in the back of an 18-wheeler. At one point, she was able to run. They grabbed her again, put her back in the 18-wheeler, and then eventually went to a house where they kept her. So again, that was the statement that she made to the investigators. Of course, under the circumstances that night of her just returning home, they didn't press too much. And then, of course, we thought we'd have an opportunity, hopefully soon thereafter, to interview. And as we well know, on horrific type cases, generally the victim wants to meet with the police because they want to get that perpetrator and put them where they belong, right? So it was a little unusual, too, that after that initial a few minutes of getting that account, that we were kind of stonewalled, didn't get an opportunity to talk with her again.
Yeah. That's so true because, in your words, in your press conferences, you indicated that she was somewhat uncooperative after that first initial interview the night she returned. Is that what precipitated those charges, those 2 misdemeanors, do you think, in your view?
No, we would have, we were going to charge under the circumstances. We charged exactly under Alabama law what we could charge. Okay. And they happened to be misdemeanors, and made the statement at that press conference that I didn't feel like that misdemeanor was really proper. In Alabama, you could go out and steal up to $500 worth of merchandise, shoplifting, and it's the same charge. So I'm hoping that I've already had several calls from legislators after our conversation that I think there should be some sort of enhancement that when you start talking about a kidnapping that has occurred to you, or maybe another violent type crime, that there be some sort of enhancement to make that punishable more than a year, which would be a felony.
Are you optimistic, or are you anticipating that enhancement will occur very, very soon to raise those charges to the felony level? Do you think that's going to happen?
I certainly hope so. I'm doing the best I can. I've talked to several legislators. I'm talking to the Speaker of the House in Alabama. And I think right now have a lot of support for that. So hopefully when the session starts, that'll be something that we're certainly going to try to push.
Do you think her parents knew that this was all a hoax? Because, obviously in some interviews, they seemed so worried and so relieved that she was found safe. Do they think, or do you think rather, that they had any inkling that this might not have been above board?
Well, met with the parents, very, very nice people, talked with them. And of course, met with them prior to her getting home, and of course they were very upset, as any parent would be if their child's missing. But I don't think so. I think parents try to believe what their kids tell them, and even with some of the information that we initially gave them, thought that might maybe spur something different. But they felt like what she had told them was accurate, and after that, we decided that it was probably time to come out and show the facts that we had, because my concern was we're a city of almost 100,000 people, and I didn't want our populace here and surrounding communities to think that we had a potential kidnapper running loose and the police aren't doing anything about it.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see her mugshot when she was initially booked? She was very cooperative in that, and then a lot of people have kind of harped on the fact that she's smiling in this mugshot. Did you see the mugshot? What do you make of that she's smiling?
Well, I've seen a lot of mugshots over the years, and I've seen some that look mad, some look happy. So, I really didn't think much of it, to be honest.
All right, Chief Derzis, what happens next in all of this? I know you and your office are going to be following it so closely, but what happens next?
Yeah, well, again, there were misdemeanors, and the misdemeanors were issued by our Hoover City Court. The Attorney General's office is going to do the prosecution. So right now, our investigators have been meeting with lawyers from the Attorney General's office, talking about their case files and everything that's been done, talking about, again, investigation still continues. So if we find anything else that potentially could be charges, we would certainly be looking at that also. But right now, we're not complete. Again, as you and I spoke earlier about the 49 hours of the disappearance, would love to know where she was. The attorney, when I read his statement, of course, they said that she was in Hoover and did this all herself. So again, we'll try to see what the facts bring us if we can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I don't want to speculate, if Carlee Russell does have severe mental health issues, which is why she might have gone on this, faked disappearance, and she has been charged with the misdemeanors. Does that lead you to have any sympathy for her, do you think?
Yeah, here's the deal. The folks of the investigation to begin with, to get Carlee Russell home to her parents safe, and that happened. So that was our, obviously our main goal. Next goal was to try to figure out where she's been. We have not figured that out. Next focus was to charge her with the crime. And, there are consequences for actions, and there needs to be consequences here. Again, the consequences that she faces, unfortunately, right now is all you can face in Alabama. So again, I'm happy where we are. I'm happy that she returned home safe. And again, we'll let the criminal justice system play it out.
All right, Chief Nick Derzis there in Hoover, Alabama. We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, sir.
All right, hope you found that informative there. Chief Derzis in Hoover, Alabama, saying still he and his investigators don't know where Carlee Russell was for those 49 hours. Russell's attorney says she was in Hoover, Alabama, but that's about it. You also heard there from Chief Derzis saying that he hopes that these charges, these misdemeanors filed against Russell, can be somewhat enhanced to felonies eventually. That's a task for the Alabama state legislature. So remember, each charge that she received carries a bond of $1,000. It's punishable by up to a year in jail and up to a $6,000 fine. Russell was later released from jail after posting bond. So we'll stay on top of this story here on Live Now from Fox.